Raina Foster balanced a tray of champagne flutes with both hands, praying she wouldn't trip over her own feet in heels she borrowed from her roommate. "Please don't fall. Please don't fall," she whispered under her breath, walking through the glittering ballroom of the Langston Art House. It was the kind of place that reeked of wealth, golden chandeliers, ice sculptures shaped like swans, and everyone dressed in designer labels she couldn't pronounce. She didn't belong here. She was just a server, hired by a catering company to pass out drinks at some fancy charity auction. The closest she'd ever get to bidding on anything was watching people raise paddles while she tried not to drop a glass. She stopped at a group near the back, her smile automatic. "Champagne," a tall man turned, and for a second Raina forgot where she was. He wasn't like the other guests. No flashy tux, no smug expression. He wore a dark navy suit that fit too well, a simple black tie, and his eyes, his eyes were this stormy kind of blue that made her chest tighten. His jaw was sharp, his stare sharper, but there was something tired in his expression. Like he didn't want to be here either. He took a glass from her tray, holding her gaze a second longer than necessary. "Thanks." His voice was low, smooth, not fake polite like the others, just real. She nodded quickly and turned away before she did something embarrassing, like stare at his mouth. "Hey," he called after her. She froze and turned back, tray still balanced. "Yeah, what's your name?" Her brows lifted. "I'm just the help." That wasn't the question. She hesitated. Raina, he repeated like he was testing the sound of it. "I'm Zane Kessler." She gave him a polite smile and moved on, not thinking much of it. Rich guys flirted with the staff all the time. It didn't mean anything, but when she glanced back, Zane was still watching her. The rest of the night was a blur of pouring champagne, dodging grabby hands, and trying not to get yelled at by the head caterer. At one point, she passed by Zane again, and he was speaking to an older man in a tux who looked important. Their conversation stopped the second she walked by, and Zane's eyes flicked to her again. Weird, by the time the auction started, Raina was hiding near the side of the ballroom, trying to give her aching feet a break. She wasn't supposed to be standing there, but no one noticed. All eyes were on the stage where a painting was being introduced, something abstract, apparently worth over $200,000. The bidding started slow. Then it got wild. 150,000, someone called. 200, another shouted. Then came a calm, clear voice from the back of the room. 500,000. Everyone turned. Raina's mouth dropped open. Zane stood with his paddle up, casual like he was ordering lunch. The auctioneer barely stuttered before slamming the gavel. "Sold. To Mr. Zane Kessler." A few people clapped, most just whispered. Raina stared. She'd heard that name before. Kessler, her eyes widened. Zane Kessler wasn't just rich, he was stupid rich. Founder of Kessler Tech, Billionaire. One of those guys who owned half of Silicon Valley and didn't even need to show up to work anymore. And he'd asked for her name, her stomach twisted. As the evening wound down, she tried to avoid him. She didn't want to be another girl he flirted with just because he was bored. But when she ducked into the back hallway to drop off her tray, she found him leaning against the wall, waiting. "Thought I lost you." "Pretty sure I'm not the one bidding $500,000 on art," she said before she could stop herself. He smiled, and it actually reached his eyes this time. "True, but I wasn't looking at the painting," she blinked. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I'm working. I know. I'll keep it quick." He stepped closer, not in a pushy way, just enough to make her heart beat faster. "I have dinner tomorrow night, boring thing, charity board. But I need someone to keep me sane. Will you come with me?" She stared at him. "You're asking me to dinner. I'm asking you to help me survive a bunch of snobs who want to talk about hedge funds. I don't own a single designer dress. I'll take care of it." She shook her head, laughing softly. "This is insane, maybe. But you didn't say no." She swallowed, then said the only thing she could think of. "Fine, but if you're a creep, I'm walking out." Zane grinned. "Fair enough." Next day, a black car pulled up outside her apartment. The driver handed her a box. Inside was a dress, sleek, black, elegant, and a note that just said, "Hope you like it. See you at 7. She almost didn't go, but something about the way he looked at her like he actually saw her made her want to take the risk. When the car pulled up to the restaurant, her jaw dropped. It wasn't just dinner. It was a rooftop candlelit with a view of the skyline and a table set for two. She stepped out, heart pounding, and Zane stood waiting in a crisp suit, holding a single white rose. "You're breathtaking," he said, offering her his hand. Raina looked up at him, stunned. "You did all this?" He leaned in. "You said no designer dress. I figured I'd make up for it." Her breath caught. Maybe this wasn't just boredom for him. Maybe he meant it. And just like that, the night changed everything. Raina had never eaten foie gras before. The waiter had called it cured duck liver in a tone that made it sound like a delicacy instead of something that should never be paired with the word liver. But she hadn't flinched. She'd lifted her fork, taken a bite, and kept her face perfectly neutral. Across the table, Zane watched her with a quiet sort of amusement, his fingers loosely curled around a glass of something deep red and expensive. "So," he said, setting the glass down, "what's someone like you doing working at an event like that?" She tilted her head. "Someone like me? Smart. Sharp, you carry yourself like someone who's used to leading, not serving. I needed the paycheck." "That's not what I asked." She leaned back slightly, the candlelight catching the edge of her collarbone. "You don't really want to know why I was there." "Try me," he said, his voice low. Raina hesitated, the urge to deflect strong, but there was something about him, something in the way he wasn't trying to impress her, wasn't trying to charm her, just listening. "I was supposed to be an interior architect," she said finally. "Got accepted into a graduate program in Chicago. But my mom got sick and I had to come home, took care of her for a year. After that, everything just—" She paused, her jaw tightening. "It's hard to go back when you've drained your savings and your portfolio's 3 years old." Zane didn't offer pity. He just nodded, like the weight of that made sense. "You still design?" he asked. "When I can, I've got sketches, concepts, things no one will ever see." "I'd like to," she blinked. "Why?" "Because you said no one would." "That makes me curious." Before she could respond, a waiter approached with the check folded inside a leather sleeve. Raina instinctively reached for her clutch, then stopped herself. She didn't even know why she'd brought it. It didn't have more than $20 and an expired Metro card. Zane handed the folder back without looking at the bill. "You always take girls to places like this?" she asked, trying to sound light. His gaze didn't waver. "I don't usually take anyone to anything." She didn't know what to make of that. "So why me?" He stood and held out his hand. "Come with me." She didn't ask where. She just followed. They stepped into the elevator, the soft hum of classical music filling the silence between them. When the doors opened, they were on the rooftop of the building higher than the restaurant, surrounded by low glass walls and hanging lights that swayed gently in the breeze. The city sprawled out beneath them, glittering and endless. "You brought me to a rooftop?" she asked, stunned. "I own this building," he said simply. "The restaurant's on the 38th floor, this is 40. I can't even afford a Metro pass and you own floors." He looked over at her. "Does that bother you?" She considered that. "I don't know. I guess I just wasn't expecting any of this." "I wasn't expecting you." The wind caught her hair, pulling it loose from the twist she'd pinned it in. Zane reached out, brushing a strand behind her ear gently, like he was thinking carefully before every movement. "You said you don't usually bring people to things," she said, her voice softer now. "So what is this?" He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking. "This is me not wanting the night to end," a beat passed. Then Raina turned abruptly toward the edge of the rooftop, gripping the glass railing. "You don't even know me. I know you didn't flinch when that guy spilled wine on your shoes. I know you didn't take the tip that old woman tried to slip into your hand. And I know you're more comfortable calling me out than pretending I'm someone worth impressing." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You memorized all that." "I noticed it. There's a difference." They stood in silence for a moment. Then she asked, "What about you? What about me? You're mysterious, broody, and clearly allergic to small talk. What's your story?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had dropped an octave. "My father was a steelworker. He died when I was 15. My mom worked 3 jobs. I built my first company in a basement with a cracked ceiling and no heating. Sold it at 22, started another, failed, started a third, that one stuck." She turned. "So you weren't born into all of this?" "No, but now they all think I was," her brow furrowed. "And you hate that?" I hate what people assume. That money made me, that I don't remember what ramen tastes like or what it's like to worry about rent. Raina's voice was quiet when she said, "You remember," vividly. She looked down at her hands, suddenly unsure. "I don't know what this is, Zane. I'm not someone who fits into your world. I don't have the right clothes or the right background or the right anything." He stepped toward her again, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. "You fit into this moment." "That's enough for me." Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away when his hand found hers. "I'm not promising anything," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm not asking for anything," he replied, eyes locked on hers. They stood there, two people from different worlds suspended in a space that shouldn't have existed between them. And somehow it did. When the wind picked up again, Raina leaned into him without thinking, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders like it was the most natural thing in the world. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but the air was thick with the possibility. And even though she didn't say it out loud, Raina knew something had changed, something she couldn't take back. Raina stood in front of the mirror in the powder room of a private estate in Bel Air, trying to steady her breathing. The dress she wore wasn't hers. It had arrived earlier that afternoon in a garment bag with a note that read simply, "Wear it tonight. Trust me." Z. It was deep burgundy, cut to fit her like it had been sewn with her measurements in mind. The silk clung to her in a way that made her feel like she belonged on a red carpet, not in a borrowed bathroom with nerves clawing at her stomach. Outside, the evening was in full swing. A charity gala in one of Los Angeles' most exclusive circles, this time for an arts mentorship program. Zane had asked her 2 nights ago if she wanted to come. She'd told him she wasn't sure. He'd said he'd pick her up anyway, and he had, in a vintage Aston Martin. She pressed her palms to the marble counter. "Don't overthink it," she whispered, then turned and walked out. The moment she stepped back into the grand foyer, she felt the shift. Heads turned, conversations paused, not because she was famous, but because she was with him. Zane stood by the fireplace, speaking with a woman in a navy gown and a gray-haired man with a cigar clenched between his fingers. When his eyes found her across the room, his posture changed, shoulders relaxed, mouth curved slightly, like she'd just answered a question he hadn't even asked aloud. He excused himself and crossed to her, offering his arm. "There you are. I was starting to think you'd climbed out the window." "Tempting," she murmured, sliding her hand onto his forearm. "Remind me again why I'm here." "Because I needed a reason to endure the next 2 hours, and you were the only one who didn't flinch when I asked." They moved through the crowd, stopping occasionally so Zane could greet someone or accept a handshake. He introduced her each time. "Not as my date or a friend, just Raina." As if that alone was enough, it wasn't long before they were approached by a woman with diamond earrings the size of grapes and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Zane," she said, air kissing both his cheeks. "I heard you outbid everyone last week. The board is still talking about it." He nodded politely. "It went to a good cause." Her gaze flicked to Raina. "And who's this?" Before Zane could answer, Raina extended her hand. "Raina Foster. I design interiors." "At least I used to." The woman blinked at her, clearly surprised to be addressed directly. Zane's voice was cool. "She's also the most original mind I've met in years." The woman gave a brittle laugh. "I'm sure." As she moved on, Raina turned to him. "That was brutal. You handled it better than I would have." "I think I'm developing a talent for surviving polite insults." "Necessary skill," he said. "You're doing better than I did my first year in these circles." "I spilled bourbon on a senator's wife." She laughed, the tension easing just a little. Later, as the crowd thinned and the music softened, Zane led her to the garden terrace. The air was cooler there, the scent of jasmine hanging in the night. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her heels clicking softly on the stone path. "Of course." "Why are you really doing this?" He stopped walking. "This," she said again, gesturing between them. "It doesn't make sense. You could be with someone who understands art auctions and owns more than one pair of heels." "I don't care about any of that. You say that, but I've seen the way people look at me when I stand next to you." Zane turned to face her. "Then let them look." She shook her head, not satisfied. "You barely know me. I know you're not impressed by money. I know you see people for who they are, not what they wear. I know you didn't hesitate to stand your ground to someone who's been on the board of the Met for 2 decades. That doesn't answer the question. His voice dropped. I'm doing this because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to hold my breath. She blinked. I've been surrounded by people who want things from me my entire life. Investors, advisors, women who thought they were in love with the version of me that made magazine covers. But you're different. You ask questions that matter. You listen, you challenge me. Raina looked away. You make it sound so noble. It's not noble, it's selfish. I want to keep feeling like this. She studied him in silence. Zane, she said finally, I don't know how to be part of your world. And I don't want to be a project for you. You're not. You're the first real thing I've felt in years. The sincerity in his voice unraveled something in her. He wasn't performing, he wasn't trying to win her over, he was just telling the truth. Still, fear flickered in her chest. What happens when this stops being exciting? She asked. When I'm not new anymore. He stepped closer, his hands at his sides. Then we build something real, and if you ever feel like I'm treating you like a prize instead of a person, you walk. And I'll deserve it. The silence between them pulsed like a heartbeat. Then she did something she hadn't planned. She reached for his tie, fingers brushing the silk, and pulled him down just enough to kiss him. It wasn't slow, it wasn't tentative. It was the kind of kiss that made the world tilt sideways. That unspooled something tight inside her chest. That made her forget where they were, who might be watching, what might come next. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. You shouldn't make promises you can't keep, she whispered. I never make promises I don't intend to fight for. And in that moment, surrounded by rose bushes and distant music, Raina believed him, even if it terrified her. The rain started as a whisper soft, almost unsure tapping against the glass walls of Zane's penthouse like a question neither of them was ready to answer. Raina stood barefoot in his living room, her heels forgotten near the door, the hem of her navy dress brushing the tops of her feet. The city below was blurred through the storm, the skyline fractured by droplets racing down the windows. She should have called a car, should have left hours ago. But nothing tonight had followed logic, and now here she was suspended in a moment she wasn't ready to let go of. Zane entered from the kitchen, 2 mugs in hand. You said you like yours without sugar. She took the tea, fingers brushing his. You remembered that. I remember things that matter, he said, settling beside her. You've been quiet since the gala. I'm trying to figure out when my life stopped being mine and started feeling like a dream someone else is having. I think mine started the same night. She took a sip, letting the warmth settle into her. That woman with the earrings, she knew your mother. Zane's jaw flexed just once. Margaret Thorne. She was on the board of the hospital where my mom worked, used to send her leftover centerpieces after fundraisers, thought it counted as charity. She said something strange to me. That she hopes this phase doesn't distract you too long, he laughed, but it was bitter. She thinks I'm supposed to marry someone from a family with a crest and a vineyard in Tuscany, and instead you're here with me, he tilted his head. You say that like it's a compromise, isn't it? Zane set his tea down, turning to face her fully. Rain streaked the windows behind him, casting shadows across his features. You think I want someone who knows which fork to use at a 12-course dinner? Someone who smiles on command and never asks me what I'm afraid of? I think. I don't know what to think anymore. You confuse me, and I don't want to be the girl you fall for just because I'm not like the others. You're not the girl I fell for. You're the woman who walked into a room full of people who underestimated her and didn't flinch. You're the one who made me realize I've been surrounded by noise for years and didn't recognize silence until you stood next to me. She placed her cup on the table, hands folded in her lap. I've spent so long surviving, I don't know what to do with someone offering me more than a scrap of attention. Then let me show you what it's like when someone doesn't flinch either. The silence between them felt different now, not heavy full. After a moment, she stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The rain was heavier now, washing away the world outside. Her reflection stared back at her hair slightly tousled, eyes wide but steady. "What would you do?" she asked. "If I told you I was offered a chance to restart my career," he joined her at the glass. "I'd ask when we're celebrating," her lips parted. "I'm serious. So am I. It's in New York." He didn't flinch. "You should take it." "That's not what I expected you to say. I don't want to be someone who holds you back. I want to be someone who hands you the pen." She turned to face him. "What if I don't want to write the next chapter alone?" Zane exhaled, almost like he'd been waiting for her to say that. "Then you don't have to. You'd come with me, if you'll have me." Her voice dropped. "You'd leave all of this. I built this life so I could afford to choose who I spend it with, not to build a cage made of glass and money." Raina pressed her forehead against his chest, her voice muffled. "What if it doesn't work? Then we fail forward." Together, they stood like that for a long time, the storm outside raging, but the world between them finally still. Weeks passed quickly after that. The media caught wind, of course. Photos of them leaving the gala arm in arm, speculative headlines, gossip blogs clawing for details. Zane ignored them. Raina learned to stop reading. They packed what mattered, sold what didn't, and when they boarded a private plane bound for New York, she didn't look back. The apartment he found wasn't a penthouse, but it had a rooftop garden and a view of Central Park. On their first morning in the city, he brought her coffee in bed and asked if she still wanted to design a gallery space he'd just acquired downtown. She asked who the client was. He said, "You." The day her first project launched a nonprofit art studio for underprivileged youth, he stood in the back of the room, watching her speak to the press with fire in her voice and purpose in her eyes. Later that night, on the rooftop of their apartment, he set a small velvet box in her palm. "I thought you didn't believe in promises you couldn't keep," she whispered. "I don't," he said, "so this one comes with a lifetime to prove it." She didn't cry, she nodded. And kissed him like saying yes was the most natural thing she'd ever done, because it was. She'd served drinks at a charity auction. That night she thought she was invisible, but the man who noticed her, the one no one expected her to reach, he hadn't just seen her, he'd chosen her. And now she was no longer surviving, she was home. The wind carried the faint scent of roasted chestnuts and street vendors' coffee as Raina stepped out of the brownstone, scarf tucked under her chin, cheeks flushed with the brisk New York air. She paused on the steps, glancing up at the third-floor window where warm light spilled through the curtains and cast a soft glow over the sidewalk. Zane had told her he'd meet her there, but she hadn't expected to see him waiting already, leaning against the sleek black SUV with a bouquet of pale ranunculus in his hand. "You're early," she said, approaching. He handed her the flowers. "You've never been late a day in your life." I adjusted. "These are my favorite," she said, surprised. "You mentioned them once, back when we passed that flower shop in Nolita. That was almost 2 months ago." I filed it away. She looked down at the bouquet, brushing her fingertips over the petals. "Where are we going?" He opened the door for her. "You'll see." The drive was quiet, not awkward, just easy. She watched the city roll past the window, lights flickering in the early evening fog. When the car stopped in front of a long, unmarked building in Tribeca, Raina raised an eyebrow. "Are we crashing someone's gallery opening?" "Sort of." He led her through a side entrance, unlocked with a keycard. Inside, the space was cavernous, exposed brick walls, steel beams, and tall windows that reached up to the ceiling. But it wasn't empty. Along the walls were installations, color studies, and scale models, all hers, her designs, the ones he'd encouraged her to show the world. She turned to him slowly. "What is this?" "The gallery I bought, but I thought you should see it like this, before the press, before the donors, just you." "Just your work," her voice caught. "You said we'd build something. I didn't think you meant literally. You made this space breathe." "I just gave it walls." She walked along the perimeter, running her hand over a miniature layout of her community center concept, the one she'd drawn in her sketchbook back in LA. Zane watched her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable for once. "You haven't asked me," she said softly, stopping in front of a suspended wire sculpture she'd welded together over the course of 3 sleepless nights. "Asked you what, if I'm happy?" "I don't need to ask, I can see it." She turned toward him, eyes shining. "I never thought I'd get to do this again, not like this." You didn't just do it. You rebuilt your life from scratch. Most people don't come back from that. You're part of the reason I did." He shook his head. "I didn't save you, Raina. You saved yourself. I just didn't get in the way." She crossed the space between them, her heels echoing once before the sound disappeared in the hush of the gallery. "You never told me what made you decide to leave LA for good." "I woke up one morning and realized everything I had back there was furniture." "You were home." A beat passed before she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I was going to give this to you later tonight, but I think now's better." He took it, curious, and opened the flap. Inside was a rendering one of her final designs, but he didn't recognize the space. "This isn't the gallery," he said. "Nope." "Is this your next project?" She smiled, heart thudding. "No, it's ours. I bought a brownstone. Well, technically, I'm in escrow. You're listed as co-owner." "I thought maybe we needed something that was actually ours from the start." Zane stared at the paper in his hand, then looked at her. "You did this without asking?" "I wanted it to be a surprise. You always get to make the big gestures." "I wanted to make one too," he laughed, a rare, full sound that filled the space around them. "You never stop surprising me." "I hope not." He pulled her into his arms, the rendering still clutched in his hand. "Say it." "Say what?" "That you're in this." "All the way." She leaned up to kiss him, her lips brushing his. "I'm in this, all the way." The next few weeks moved fast. They held the gallery's grand opening 2 days before the new year. The event drew critics, collectors, and the city's tastemakers, but none of them mattered when Zane stood beside her, fingers threaded with hers. Her designs were praised, commissions followed, and for the first time she didn't second-guess her talent. They moved into the brownstone in early spring. It wasn't furnished yet, but that didn't stop them from camping out in the living room with takeout and a mattress on the floor. They painted walls together, argued over tile, laughed when the sink exploded after Zane tried to fix a loose valve himself. On a quiet Saturday morning, he proposed again, not with a ring, but with a blueprint for the rooftop garden she'd always dreamed of. "It's not diamonds," he said, "but I thought you'd prefer a place to drink coffee and draw floor plans." She tackled him right there on the unfinished hardwood, laughing through tears. They married in the garden 6 months later, no press, no extravagance. Just them, a handful of close friends, and the city skyline behind them. She wore a silk jumpsuit. He wore a charcoal suit with his sleeves rolled up. When he said, "I do," he didn't look away from her once. When she said it back, she meant it more than anything she'd ever said in her life. Their days settled into a rhythm that felt like music. Mornings filled with coffee and sketchbooks, afternoons of meetings and missed calls. Evenings where they cooked together, danced barefoot in the kitchen, argued over stupid movies. He still surprised her with flowers. She still left notes in his jacket pockets. Eventually, they turned the guest room into a nursery. The baby came in August, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that could rattle the windows. Zane held their daughter like he'd been waiting his whole life for her. "You've given me everything," he whispered, pressing a kiss to Raina's temple. "I didn't even know what I needed until I met you." She smiled through tears, cradling their child against her. "We built this together," and they did. Not with blueprints or billions, but with trust, risk, and the kind of love that didn't ask to be earned, only shared. The kind that grew louder with time, not quieter, the kind that changed everything. Forever.